Hey guys, welcome to this week's video. In this week's video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at adding some extra features on top of the Advanced Locomotion system. Now, the Advanced Locomotion system, if you've not used it before, is a brilliant system, as the name suggests, regarding it surrounds the locomotion, so the movement of your character. It's built with some sophisticated systems of animations and other sort of camera mechanics and IK mechanics, which basically takes the character's movement and sort of adjusts the model to suit the profile that it's with, or the environment that it's within. What we're going to typically this system or this project. He's probably advised not to build on top of it. However, many projects have been. So with that being said, we're just going to add some weapon system to it, i.e. a Linetrace. So just to give you an example of what that's going to look like. So if you've never used this before, you've got an assortment of weapons. You can hold Q and then you get a rifle, pistol, some, there's all sorts of stuff in here. You should definitely, if you've not used it before, have a go, have a play around with it. You'll probably be super impressed with it already as is. But then if you do want to add guns to it, which you can see here, we'll then add in Linetrace fire. And then essentially you can only fire once aiming, so we'll set that up. And if you're holding something like binoculars, it'll say you've not got a weapon equipped, you can't fire this. And that's really it for this project. I'm going to build on it further in future videos and keep adding to it some more features. But for this video, let's get the Linetrace sorted. Crack on. Okay, so just a few other things before we start. This project has been made in UE5 this time, but this does work for all the previous versions. Typically, I do normally make stuff in UE 4.26. However, I've decided to mix it up a little bit and just use UE5. This shouldn't affect your project in any way. What we do today should work in all previous versions, with the exception of some of the really older versions. But they're untested, so I could still be wrong. So with that being said, let's jump into it. Okay, so just a few things that I like to do before I start with anything on this project is I like to just set up a few bits and pieces in the project settings. So if we go to project settings, and on the left hand side, if you go to maps and modes, I think the default is like the game mode base. This may be my project or not, but I think the ALS game mode SP should be selected. So let's just select that, and then that gives us the opportunity now to change out a few of the other bits and pieces. So at the moment, our character class is the ALS anim character BP. In a second, we're going to make a clone of that, and we'll change that. But for now, just select the game mode, and you can close it out. And then, if you are in UE5, open up your content browser or your drawer, and this is what I like to do. I like to dock it in the layout. Bit old school. Spent too much time in UE4. I like it here. If space is an issue, then I do have it docked, but for most of the time I spend in UE5, I like it here. Anyway, in the contents folder, open up the Advanced Locomotion folder, go to Blueprints and go to Character Logic, and then you should be met with then the ALS anim character BP, and then the base. What we're going to do is we're going to make a child of this ALS character BP. The reason we're making a child is because if we do need to go back in the future and just make some changes to the base character, which has a lot of the logic in, or the ALS man himself, we don't then have to update our character individually. If we've duplicated it, for example, because it's a child, it'll just carry all the information from the parent. For this video, I'm going to call my character shooter underscore BP. And then now what I want to do is I'm going to set that as my main character when we spawn. So to do that, top, you want to go to Blueprints, go to your World Overrides Game Mode, and because we've now changed the game mode to the ALS Game Mode BP, we can go down to the Pawn, go to Select Pawn Class, and go to Shooter BP. And then just to make sure that it is the Shooter BP that we're going to select, I'm just going to double click the shooter BP. On the right hand side, you should have all these colours. The default colour, we change that to red, hit OK, and press play. Our character should be red. If your character's still blue, just go over the previous steps I've just discussed again, and hopefully you just missed a step. If not, pop a comment down below and I'll try and help you out. With that being said, you can select whatever colour you want. I typically go for a darker colour. I'm just going to put in a random value here, 2D, which is about 8. And I knew that was a greyish black. So the reason I want a dark character is I'm kind of thinking like special ops, darker. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Pick whatever colour you want. It doesn't matter. Right, so we're in the character class now. This is where we're going to be putting our code. So head over to your event graph, and you'll see you've got these parent ticks and parent begin players. That's because we're a child of the original class, and the original class has obviously the begin player and ticks being used, so they just sort of replicate. Anyway, that's besides the point. So we want to shoot our weapon. Now, if you see here, we don't have anything equipped. You hold Q and scroll down, you can pick the rifle. If you right click, we'll start to aim, and if you left click, nothing happens. But because of this project, the right click aim is already programmed in. Great, so we inherited that from our parent class. But we need to really, we really need to know in this blueprint if we are aiming. So one of the first things we'll actually do is we will do a right mouse button, and you could go into the project settings and set this up as an input, but I'm not going to. I'm going to highlight the node and I'm going to hit the C, which is the comment, and I'm just going to put aim weapon. I'm just going to change the color of this comment to like an orange. That's by selecting the comment and picking a color. Once that's done, that's just so it's obvious when we start building on this. I want to have like certain features color coded, so I know all the dark, like the reddish stuff, is all weapon related stuff, and blue stuff is to health, and I don't know, all that. Right, so when we've got that button pressed, we want to set a bool to say that we are holding it is true, and then when we release, it's not. So to do that, we need a variable. So on the left hand side, click the variable. It should default to Boolean unless you've made a previous variable of a different type. I think it remembers the last type that you did. I'm going to name this one aim held with a question mark. I'm going to drag this over and I'm going to set it. I'm going to hold, with this node selected, I'm going to hold Control W and that'll duplicate it. I'm going to tick the top one and then I'm going to connect that to pressed. And then for released, I'm going to set it to the bottom one. So when we press the right mouse button, we're going to set this Boolean that we are holding the aim button. It's true. And then when we let go of the right mouse button, we're going to set that to false. So essentially, we've got a way of checking whether we are aiming or not. Bigger, down. So now we've got our aiming set up. We've got a cue to say, right, we are aiming, do this. Now, we need to shoot. So, I'm going to have my shoot key set as the left mouse button, which is very common for all FPSs. So I'm going to have left mouse. Again, if you want to, in the project settings, you can go to inputs and add an action mapping or a key mapping to this being the fire key, but I'm not. I'm going to highlight it, press C. I'm going to call this one fire weapon. And again, I'm going to change the comment color to a red so it stands out. Down. And when we press the left mouse button, We really only want to fire if we are aiming. I'm not going to go down the route of hip fire in this one, but that would be that'd be a separate case to this. If you're not aiming, you shouldn't fire. We could go down that in a future video, but for this one, I'm not. So if we press it, we want to go to a branch. And we want to go, well, if we press it, we only want to do something if this is true. So grab your aim held and drag till you get to your condition. So what we're saying here is when we press this, if the aim held is true, we're going to print string. And we're going to say bang. We're going to fire our gun. Yep. And once we release, we don't want to do anything. But if this is false, we are going to be not aiming. So if we hit compile now and we hit play, so if we click, we're not aiming. We right click and shoot, bang, bang, bang. But we don't have a gun in our hand. So we need to check to see if we've also got a weapon in our hand. Now, I'll tell you what, we can leave that there. We're not aiming. How do we check if we've got a weapon in our hand? Now, if we go back to view, here's our mesh, and essentially underneath our mesh we've got this child here called held object. Now the held object also has two other children, skeletal mesh and static mesh. And if I click on the skeletal mesh, and if I hover on the right on the mesh, check under here, I can see that I've got a few meshes that are available. So one of them's an M4A1, one of them's an M9, one of them's a camera, one of them's a bow. And obviously I've got a skeletal mesh, but that we're not going to be... Sorry, we've got a mannequin, but we're not going to use that as a weapon. I'm going to say that all of my weapons are, or anything that's got the ability to shoot, let's say, i.e. the bow, the camera, the M4A1 and the M9, they all have the capacity to shoot, are skeletal meshes. I think if we check to see if we've got a skeletal mesh sort of active, that's telling us that we've got a weapon active. If we look under static meshes, this might not work as great. You've got stuff like a barrel, binoculars, and a box. You can't shoot with binoculars or a barrel. I think that's probably the best way we go. So, by default, this is none. It's blank. I don't have anything in my hand by default, which is right. So, what we can do is we can grab skeletal mesh, drag that out. Now, if you remember, when I clicked on this skeletal mesh, with inside that, under mesh, it also had a skeletal mesh. So if we drag off this and type in get and then skeletal mesh, there we go. So under variables and mesh, skeletal mesh is an option. And then if we drag off that and say is valid, and if you pick the one with the question mark, this one's an executable. And by that I mean it takes an execute in. Depending on this, it says, yes, I'm valid, no, I'm not. It's almost like a branch, but instead of it being a boolean, it's an execute. So you can think of it like that a little bit. So, if I press the left mouse button and I'm aiming, and I have a skeletal mesh, is valid, bang. If not, print string, no weapon equipped. Alright. So let's test that now. So what we're saying is, when we click, if we're aiming and we have a skeletal mesh, bang. If not, we're either not aiming or we don't have a weapon. So first of all, let's click. We're not aiming. If we right click, we've no weapon equipped. As you can see from the top left, we're seeing their messages. Now if I hold Q and I get a torch, which isn't a weapon, and I shoot, I'm not aiming, but if then I aim, it's not a weapon, so we don't get a shoot. If I then equip a rifle, aim, bang, bang, bang. If I stop aiming, I'm not aiming. So far, so good. Instead of having a bang, let's actually have a line trace, which is going to hit something. So, from the string, out of here, we're going to have a line trace. Now, there's a few options, but we want line trace by channel. Now, I have a previous video about adding the line trace weapon fire. I believe it was to an FPS, and I think I've also got one doing it to a third-person shooter. I go into a lot more depth about the line trace by channel and what all these bits and pieces do. So I'd recommend you check that out. If I remember to, I'll put a card up at the top now for you to click on and you can check that out. Alternatively, if you do have any questions and you can't be bothered watching one of my other videos, that's fine. Chuck a comment down below and I'll try and answer it for you as well. So, just to briefly explain the things we need to know about, a line trace needs a start position and an end position. A start position is typically like where the eyes are in your character's model, or just at some point where you're stood. And the end trace is going to be typically where your gun will fire to. And an easy way to think about that is if you take where your eyes are looking and go forward from that position, typically you'll hit what you're aiming at. So that's what we're going to do. Now, a few other bits and pieces. You've got a draw debug type. Now, this enables you to have a visual representation of that line in your world. Currently, if we fired a line trace, it wouldn't be visible. You wouldn't be able to see it. But if we pick this draw debug type and set it to 4 duration, and just click on this little arrow here, and have a draw time of 5 seconds. For 5 seconds after we fire this line trace, it will draw a line in the world of where that line trace actually is, and it'll stay there for 5 seconds, so then you can use it to figure out whether your line trace is working correctly. So while we're setting this up, we're going to have that enabled. Now, let's sort the start position out. Now, like I said a minute ago, your start position is really where like your eyes are in your character's head, or where your actor is positioned in the world. Now, a few months ago, I was made aware of a really neat node which actually gets the location of where your eyes are looking, and that is, I just type in eye view. Got it right. Eye view. And there's a get actor's eye viewpoint node, which is absolutely brilliant. And it does exactly what it says on the tin. It takes the position of the character's eyes in its head, typically where the camera is about, and uses that as its location. So what we can do for a start position is just drag that out location straight into the start. Now, when I said for the end position is wherever your eyes are pointing, and then you want to go forward from that, that's just as simple as well. So from the out rotation of the same node, we can say get the forward vector for that, and that's essentially go forward in the world from this angle or position, and this really points you in the direction of forward. And we want to say, right, great, I want to go forward in this direction by an amount. Now, this amount will be sort of like your weapon range. So for pistols it might be shorter, for snipers it might be the longest. You can determine that yourself, and we're just going to do a multiplication. Now in Unreal 4, at this point you'll need to do a times by float, so that would be multiply float. In Unreal 5 you'll just get the multiply node, and you'll need to right click this vector and convert the pin to a float. And this essentially is going to be your weapon range. So you could here promote this to a variable, call it weapon range. Now I'm just going to hit compile here, and now I can set this weapon range here on the right hand side. So I'm just going to set the default value now to 1500, because I think that's a good range for me to use it as an example. This will be probably like quite a short range weapon at this point, but you'll see that in just a moment. So now we've got this forward vector, now we've got our range, and essentially what we want to do is we want to add our eye location and then the sort of the range of that location together. So drag off this vector and do an add. We're going to add the range vector to our location vector, and this is going to give us our end position. Wonderful. So let's just a bit like that. So got our line trace. We've already determined it's only going to happen when we've got a gun, and we've got a little bang here for an effect. Let's hit compile. Let's hit play. Test it out. Okay, so we run around, click, we're not aiming, we right click, we don't have a weapon equipped, hit Q, go down to rifle, we click now, we're not aiming, but if we aim, fire, you can now see that we've got a weapon trace which is somewhat in the line of the weapon. You can see here that if you've not used a line trace before, if you can see here, as we aim around, you get this red line, and that's coming from the eyesight to the place that you're looking at in the distance. And then what you'll see is you've got this little red square. That red square on the wall is actually an indication of what it's hitting. And if you could, let's see, if you shoot a wall and look at the other side, you'll see a green line. That green is signifying that the trace has continued, but the reason it's green is because it's hit something before that point. So that's just a little quick tip there if you've never used a line trace before. Let's test the pistol. We've got a pistol, let's fire. Again, we're getting the line trace. Bang, bang, bang. But now we're not aiming, but now we are. We got to a two-hand, it's the same thing. We've still got the gun, that works. Now if we grab a torch, can't fire a torch, that's cool. Same with a barrel, can't shoot a barrel, that all works. And we've just died. Not too sure why I've just died, but we've just died. Oh, I'll tell you what I did. I pressed X to ragdoll. I'm going to leave it there for now. This is literally the start of things to come. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask you if you want me to go into more detail about the things that I'm talking about. I've kind of changed my pace up here that I normally do. Normally I really go into, well, I like to go into enough detail for you to understand everything that I show you. I wanted to move a little bit quicker in this one, so I don't want to go through everything, just the stuff that we're really using. Let me know in the comments if you want me to sort of dig down into the detail a bit more, or if you're happy with the pace, that'd be cool. If this helped you, please consider giving me a like so I've got that feedback. It really helps me to know what kind of things you want to see and what you don't want to see. And if you do like seeing this kind of thing, consider subscribing so you don't miss anything. And with all that being said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another video.
Eyes on my display, you say we need a change, and I feel that you mean it. you and me.